Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk all things Alabama football with you. Coming off a glitchy first half, perhaps against the Citadel, but I said at some point Saturday, it's like if you reverse the first and the second half, that would have been exactly as everyone expected the game to go. So like. And, we've said before, there's nothing really there's rarely anything to be gleaned from a game like that. So, all overreactions aside, and I certainly was one of the people overreacting in the first half, but it's a paycheck game. So
is there anything from that first half that is concerning?
I do feel like especially the interior offensive line did not they Deontay Brown wasn't playing and the
other way got hurt.
Yeah. But you still kind of would have liked to see a little more inside push from those guys. Like it felt like other than a big run each by Damian and Najee, they just didn't really do anything on the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because against LSU, the offensive line was incredible. And then for the first half against Mississippi State, like that against a great defensive front, they were like really, really playing well and really sort of imposing their will. And then kind of things changed. And I mean, it happened to come at the time when Deontay Brown went out. I don't think that that's the entire story or even most of the story, but it just flipped. And then I would agree, like that is the one thing for me that was like a little bit concerning from the game against the Citadel, is that I was surprised. Like those guys on that defensive line for the Citadel should not really be making plays against Alabama. So it's kind of like, we talk about this a lot, but progress isn't always linear. But still, it's sort of a strange volatility going on, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't like. It's sort of annoying, but I don't think you look at that and say, crap, there. If 2 weeks ago or if a couple weeks ago against LSU, you were like, wow, this offensive line is amazing. Like they could block Clemson. Like you're not now looking at it and going like, they're terrible. Like the sky is falling. They're not going to be able to get pushed against anyone. I just,
Rich, how are you feeling right now about the line?
I mean, it doesn't change how I feel about the upcoming games, just the expectation. But I mean, it was surprising. But
I rewatched some of the Mississippi State game today, just the offense really, and it was when they were getting stopped, when things kind of changed. It was a lot of zone. There's a lot of outside zone and inside zone, and I don't think that's where they're at their best.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're at their best where you got everybody's down blocking and then you kind of pull somebody around and you kind of create some leverage that way. Like I really think that's where they're at their best, and they're still not like this great zone team in part because you've got so many new guys and you've got guys playing out of position, and their best zone blocking offensive lines have been ones where it was sort of an older group, right? Like in 12 or 13, you had the experience, and you don't really have the experience with this group. And this is something we've talked about, quite a bit this year. But right now on the offensive line, you've got 2 first-year players, one playing out of position. Your center, who's your most experienced player, is playing a different position. It's really only your left tackle who's been entrenched at his position for an extended period of time. So It doesn't really surprise me that they're still not great zone blocking, but on sort of gap scheme plays where where you can just sort of let your talent take over, right? Like you just get everybody down blocking and just imposing your will on 3 or 4 guys, and you bring one guy around and he shows off his athleticism and he makes a play. I think so. I think maybe part of it was like a foot off the gas thing against Mississippi State. I haven't rewatched a lot of the game against this, or I haven't rewatched any of the game against the Citadel, except for like a Tua highlight package just to watch him play, because which is always a fun thing to do. So I can't really comment on the exact type of scheme runs that they were running there, but I do think though that's something to sort of look forward to, and especially as they go against a very good defensive front this Saturday. Yeah. I think they're going to get back maybe to more of these gap scheme plays, and I think they'll get back to finding success, especially if the guards are healthy.
Yeah, and this goes back to something that we talked about a ton before, that the never like take the game plan from a game against a team like this as indicative of how things are going to be going forward. Like, you think about games in the past, like I think, in one of the September games in 2015, they had Jake Coker throw like 30 passes because, they were trying to work on some stuff. And like in 2016 against Mississippi State, Jalen threw for like 350 yards or something like that. Like they take games like that to kind of, they become glorified scrimmages in a way. And so like, the play calling is never what it's going to be when they are, expect to have to give maximum effort to win, basically.
I think the most interesting sort of conversation as it relates to the offense, and we didn't have a show after Mississippi State, so I think it's probably still timely to bring this up, is that for a while I had believed, and I think we had really believed, and I do want to see if Duke comes down and scores here to force overtime to win the game. So we're going to pause for 2 seconds.
I've got it on half the screen.
Oh, no call. No. Wow. Okay. Well, it looked inevitable there for about 3 or 4 minutes that Duke was going to come back and win. And
I'm still 10.6 seconds behind.
So. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, you will see the finish. Yeah. Anyway, right. So Mississippi State. So I think, for the longest time we had sort of all kind of believed that, the only way to beat Alabama was just to sort of play, single high coverages, come down, play man on the receiver, stack the box. And LSU, and that's what LSU did. And LSU had more success against Alabama, at least on the scoreboard, their defense had more success against Alabama than anybody else. Obviously, Alabama, ran up a ton of yards against them, but at least on the scoreboard, they had success. And Mississippi State had success in a different way. They came out and they played split safeties on the first 2 drives. And on those first 2 drives, Alabama did against them exactly what I thought that this Alabama team would do against even a good defense that plays split safety coverage, which is run the ball effectively, take your throws underneath, gain, make incremental progress down the field, no chunk plays, but, death by 1,000 cuts, and eventually, they're going to kill you. And that's what they did in those first 2 drives, and they did them to perfection. And then things changed, and Alabama got a little bit sloppy. There was a fumble on the exchange. There was a weird 3rd down call. Things were kind of weird, and I don't know if there's any sort of predictive nature there. But like Mississippi State did have success, in these sort of split safety basis. Now, they weren't just sitting back and playing cover 2, so that's an important thing. They were showing split safety coverage and then almost always blitzing, somebody off the edge and bringing an extra guy and then rotating a safety down. So it was kind of like a it was kind of like a hybrid of the approach that we expected teams to take. They were just showing the split safety looks and then bringing people down. But I think it does beg the question of whether, when Alabama faces another defensive front that's the equal of Mississippi State's, can that team, and I don't know, who that is. I mean, maybe that's the other question, is who does have the front that's the equal of Mississippi State's. But, you know, can a team have that kind of success against Alabama in terms of stopping their running game? You know, without necessarily sitting back in split safety coverage all the time, but rotating someone down late instead of stacking the box from the beginning of the play. Like, is that a viable path to success against Alabama, especially for a team like, I don't know, Clemson, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely something teams are going to try to do because, you know, if you're, you know, as good a teams as they might still have left on the schedule, and they could be facing three really, you know, if the sort of expected path is there and they play, you know, well, four really, I guess, you know, you play Auburn, Georgia, Michigan, Clemson. Like, Georgia's line is maybe a step below the other three, but it's still a really good defense, and so you're potentially looking at four really incredible defenses that you're going to be playing. None of those have quite the sheer athletes in the secondary that LSU has. So I don't necessarily know that it's going to be a winning strategy for anyone to just, you know, line up and play bump and run with one safety and try to load the box. So if you're a team like Clemson and you're saying, okay, we think we can win up front and stop the run with you know, without loading the box, then, you know, you look at Mississippi State and say, okay, they had some success doing this stuff. Then, like, you know, if those are the kind of things you're comfortable doing, then that's what you want to do, probably.
The one anecdote to that, and the jury's still kind of out on whether this is a possibility, but, you know, everything changes if they can run Tua.
Yeah. And that I think that's a strong possibility going forward. I mean, he's certainly I'm not sure I expected how right I would be about that knee brace.
The day you tweeted that, like 5 hours later, suddenly pictures are surfacing from practice where he doesn't have the knee brace. And it's like, wow, good call.
I mean, but it's like he had said before, it's like, oh, I hate it. You know, I don't want to, you know, I'd take it off if they let me. And, you know, people have noticed that, like, a lot of times when he had been lying on the ground after hits, it's like he was adjusting the brace and stuff. And, it just looked like he felt a whole lot more, and, you know, again, there's not a whole lot you can draw from it against a team like that. 18 to 22, 340 yards, 4 touchdowns is a pretty amazing stat line, but it was just that it's less the stats and more that he just, like, looked comfortable again in a way that we haven't seen really since the original knee injury. So,
Mitch, how did you feel about Tua? You know, the general, I mean, the performance against the Citadel, or sort of just generally where he's at, you know, health-wise and everything.
I mean, there's definitely a reason you don't see a lot of skill guys wear the knee braces, that it's mostly like, you know, offensive, defensive line guys, just because I think it just limits anything lateral. So him, the fact that they went ahead and even took it off and didn't leave it on for Citadel seems like a really good sign.
I guess that's my question, right? Like I don't know how much you guys know about sports injuries. I don't really know anything, but, like, you know, the fact that they gave him the okay to play without it, does that say anything about, because, I mean, we're still really in the dark here.
Because we don't even know what the original injury was.
Right. We don't know what the original injury was. If you listen to Saban, you would come away thinking that he's actually not even hurt at all and that there's no injury, but, you know, that still seems a little tough to believe. Like, we're totally in the dark here. But, like, if there was, like, an actual tear or something, like, you know, a small minor, you know, is it a strain or a sprain that's a tear? I always forget.
A sprain is actually a minor tear.
A sprain is a minor tear. Okay.
And I don't think strain is actually even a proper medical term for an orthopedic injury.
Okay. So, like, if there was, like, an actual sprain to something, would they let him go out there without the knee brace? Like, I mean, maybe, but, like, that has to be suggestive of something with regards to the seriousness of the injury, right?
Yeah. I do think there are some circumstances where you can have, like, a minor, like I think about the couple of knee injuries that Steph Curry's had over the last couple of years. So he's had, in 2016 in the playoffs, he had a grade 2 MCL sprain. and then had a grade 1 later like a year ago. And those were the kind of, like, I know the first one was, he eventually came back and obviously was not 100%, but it was the sort of thing where it wasn't gonna get worse.
Okay.
It just like, you can only really fix it with surgery. So they waited and did that after the finals. So there's a possibility that it's something like that. But I don't know. The fact that they had the brace for so long, and he, like, that was with the sort of thing where you get hurt initially and then you're out for a while.
Right.
And then you come back after you've rehabbed a bit and you can play a little bit, and
like Steph missed like an entire playoff round with that injury in 2016, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I mean, that's kind of suggests
multiple weeks, yeah. So my guess is that, I don't know, right now, if I had to guess, like, I think we make the assumption that he's fully healthy, because, like, he never actually missed any time.
Right.
So it can't have been that serious to begin with. And if they're willing to let him go without the brace after having it for so long against the Citadel, then I think that says they at least feel comfortable that, like, there's not any greater risk of him injuring it than there is on any given football play.
Yeah. I mentioned this on Twitter, but, like, one of the most annoying things about this injury is that every single throw that Tua makes is a referendum on his health, and Tua's great. Like, he's a great player. But to hear some people talk, you would think that before the Missouri game, he never missed a throw. He didn't miss many throws, but he missed a throw every now and then. So this whole oh, well, if Tua was healthy, he wouldn't have missed X throw in X game. I mean, I don't know that. Like, sometimes guys miss throws. I watched a little bit of NFL this weekend. Those guys are really good. They also missed some throws, and, like, it just happens. So I'm actually, like, I'm very optimistic about his health. The guy who had that like, before the last touchdown that he was in for on Saturday, when he sort of scrambled and he juked the guy in the open field, when, like, he really, I forget which leg he dug into the ground, but, like, he really dug one of his legs into the ground and then cut hard the other way, and, like, did it seamlessly, then, gets tackled near the goal line, hurries everybody up, sneaks the ball in himself for a touchdown. I mean, to me, those are the kind of things that people do, both physically and mentally, when you're feeling healthy and when you're feeling, pretty spry. And, I just think, I don't know. I said this on Twitter too during the Mississippi State game, that in the first half, I thought Tua looked pretty healthy in the first half too.
That throw to Irv, where to get them right at the goal line on, I guess it was the first touchdown drive.
That corner route. Yeah. And I thought, he showed good mobility in the pocket in the first half against Mississippi State. And then, he got tackled around the ankles and he was kind of slow to get up to start the second half. And then obviously he took the shot to the quad. Things changed, and, like, clearly at that point he wasn't 100%. But I did think that there was some progress in the Mississippi State game. And then I thought there was a lot of progress on Saturday against the Citadel. So, maybe I'm sort of jumping the gun here, but I'm feeling pretty good about his health situation. I don't know. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm not super worried.
I mean, I think you make a good point about the way he ran, getting in for that sneak, like, because, the thing about injuries like that is that a lot of times, even after it's fully healthy physically, guys are still hesitant because, that sort of thing gets in your head, kind of. And the fact that he meant, I mean, and maybe that's just who Tua is as a guy, right? Like, he's
right. When you get in the heat of the moment,
he has a very aggressive personality, but, like, that just didn't seem to me like a guy who had any doubt or worry that he was going to hurt himself. So I think that's a pretty good sign going forward. Auburn.
So they haven't quite had the year that people were expecting.
Not so much. It's really hard to run Gus Malzahn's offense when your guards are so bad that you basically can't run power. And really that, like, I mean, if you were to just, I mean, they have other issues as well. Like Stidham's regressed a little bit, and Booby Whitlow is good, but he's been hurt. Can I just say how weird it is that he spells his nickname Boobee, Booby, like
Boobee?
Yeah. That's
Yeah. Instead of just a classic IE, yeah.
Yeah. He's good, but he's been hurt. So they, he's by far their best back. And losing him has hurt their offense. The defense has mostly been fine. It's suffered really as a result of association with offense. But if you were to fixate on one thing that has really been the ruining of Auburn's season, it's the offensive line and specifically the guard play.
And that, you would think, would not bode well in this particular matchup, given the interior defensive lineman that they're going to be facing on Saturday.
Yeah, if you have bad guards, you don't want to see Quinnen Williams come to town.
Yeah, nobody beats Alabama with bad guards. Mitch, how do you any sort of kick off Auburn with any general thoughts?
I started making one of those like little charts I had made for like LSU. And then I started to realize that like there wasn't really a point because it was even worse than LSU. Like Alabama was just literally so much better at every measurable stat than Auburn that it was like there was no point.
Yeah, I went in and like toggled back and forth between the Auburn and LSU stat profiles, and I was really only looking at Auburn's offense, but it's like they're basically like LSU is like 75th in rushing S&P plus and 85th in passing, and Auburn is like 10 spots better in each. They're just like they're a little better on offense than LSU, but like
and more than probably a little worse on defense.
Yeah,
Auburn is bad on offense. They are 84th in rushing S&P plus.
Yeah,
that's not great. That's really not great. And it doesn't seem like they make, so, the concern probably overblowing about Alabama is the ability for teams to make explosive plays against them. And I think that, Alabama's defensive success in recent weeks has sort of mitigated that concern. But according to S&P, Auburn, not particularly explosive, rather unexplosive.
Yep.
So it's hard. Gus, always, I don't doubt that they'll have a good plan, but it is really hard to see them moving the ball with any sort of efficiency in this game. Last year they kind of came out and were slinging it. Like, obviously they had Carry-On and they gave Carry-On the ball a lot, and because that's just their offense. But like they were slinging it, and they won really on Stidham's arm.
Yeah,
more than anything.
I think that's a really like an underrated part of how that game went was that Stidham had a really great game, and they kind of put it on him to win, and he did.
Yeah, he was just balling out, and that's not going to happen this year.
No.
Alabama's also not going to score just 14 points this year. But
probably not.
Probably not, yeah. I don't know. Is there a chance that this is competitive? I mean, the line is 24. That's pretty steep. That's got to be that's probably got to be the biggest line since 2012, right?
It is, yes.
So, I mean, how does Auburn compete in this game? I guess is really what the question is.
Gus pulls everything out of his bag of tricks. The offensive line plays like they haven't played all season. They, I don't know, get a flea flicker or something. And they have a freshman receiver, Seth Williams, who averages like 20 yards a catch. He's like their one really explosive playmaker on offense. Alabama coughs up the ball a couple of times. The offensive line isn't good. I don't know, like maybe a 2009 type of game where Auburn kind of gets a lot of breaks to go their way. that's the only way I see it being close. And, you know, even in 2009 it was close, but Alabama still won. Like that's the closest thing I can see to, but I mean, I don't know. I just don't like, if this were an Alabama offense of really any time in the past 10 years, you could say like, okay, maybe Alabama doesn't play that well on offense and, you know, Auburn manages to keep it close, but it's just hard to see them doing that against a team that can score like Alabama can.
Right. You've made this point before, but there's not really many upsets in the Iron Bowl, which doesn't have any predictive value, like any real predictive value. But it's just interesting that, like, I can't even tell you the last time there was an Iron Bowl where one team was a significant underdog and that team won. Like Auburn has won some games here where they've been a significant underdog. In fact, they're in their 3 Iron Bowl wins, you know, 2010, 2013, and last year they were Vegas underdogs, but slight. I mean, we're talking, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember what 13 was, but
like plenty of times when it's close, you know, if it's the spreads, you know, a touchdown or whatever, like, yeah, sometimes the underdog wins, but like you could probably count on one hand the number of times you come into the Iron Bowl with a spread like this, with the teams having seasons like this, and the underdog actually won. Like when it's a big spread, sometimes it's closer than expected, but the better team almost always wins.
The most interesting thing from this game, I guess, is going to be to see how the offensive line rebounds, right? And to see, like, you know, how can Alabama block them? I mean, they're not gonna get overrun by them, no. but whether or not they play well, you know, because right. I mean, I do think that it's important, you know, for them to, because, like, you know, that game next week, like, that game is losable, and it would be really nice for the offensive line to sort of put together a good performance here against Auburn to sort of have something to feel good about heading into that, week. But, you know, overall, just I mean, there's not, like, it's really hard. Like Mitch's point about sort of looking at the stat profiles, like, it is really hard to dig in and to find an area in which we think that, like, they can be successful in this game, because there's no advantage.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, there's just very little Auburn can do, and it's interesting because, like, you know, trying to sort of think about, like, storylines to talk about from this game and everything, it kind of makes you think big picture about this whole Alabama season, where there hasn't been a lot of interesting things to say in game previews.
No, we're gonna get the first one of those in about a week.
Yeah. I'm excited to, like, dig in and say, like, okay, Georgia, like, that's a challenge. Like, you know, it'll still be a double-digit spread probably, which is crazy. But, like, you know, there'll be some things that, like, okay, Georgia's going to be able to do this, and Georgia's going to be able to do that, and Alabama's going to probably face a little bit of adversity in this game, and, you know, they're going to have to overcome that. But, like, there hasn't been, like, a single game this year where I was super interested before the game to be like, okay, this is the matchup, like, this is going to be interesting to watch, and this is going to be interesting to watch, and this is going to be a challenge or whatever. Like, I mean, we did that for LSU, but, like, at the same time, we were saying, yeah, but this isn't actually going to be competitive.
We weren't wrong.
We weren't wrong at all. Like, it was, like, super uncompetitive, and, like, you know, so, like, there just hasn't been. It's crazy. Like, there hasn't been a year like as great as Alabama's been. They haven't had a year like this. And we talked about this idea of them being 100% win expectancy in every single game. I think that they're still there, right?
They're
still on it. So 100%.
Yeah, someone pointed that out to Bill this past week, and he was like, "Oh my god!"
Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. 100%. I was a little worried coming off the Mississippi State game that was going to be less than 100%. But Mississippi State just did nothing on offense, which I think is just like, which is I think sort of their downfall on the grading scale there. But and I would think that this would be another 100% game coming up here. Yeah. The real question is going to be like, can they keep this up when like they face other top 5 teams, and they're going to face a few of them going forward here.
I wouldn't be surprised if they knock on wood and all that, but if they get to 14-0 with it,
all 100%.
Like Georgia's good, and Georgia could definitely keep it close, and Georgia could win that. Like,
right,
it is not at all insane to suggest that Georgia could win. They are not likely to win, but they have a shot where other teams have not. I don't think Michigan or Notre Dame. It's probably, if chalk holds, it'd be Michigan. I don't think either of them is a particular challenge.
So against Georgia, we got a question from at Singapore Slang. About the question reads, since UGA has to scout for Georgia Tech anyway, I wonder if they install a few triple option plays just for Alabama in the SEC championship game. I do. So they're not going to suddenly become a triple option team, and they're certainly not going to be running any triple option with Fromm. And it should also be pointed out, of course, that running the triple option is hard, even if you have the skill guys, even if you have a super fast quarterback and super fast skill guys. Like, there's a lot that goes into being able to successfully run the triple option. As an aside, I remember, going into the national championship in 2011 against LSU, obviously, and this is sort of appropriate timing for this conversation, is that Georgia Southern obviously had a lot of success against Alabama with the triple option. And the most success, I think, of any team that year against them.
Oh, easily, yeah.
And Kirby, Saban finally, for once before bowl games, makes his coordinators available, which is always fun. And somebody asked Kirby about the idea of LSU running the triple option, because they had Jordan Jefferson, and they were a run-based team, and they had multiple good running backs and everything, and they also had kind of like a hybrid receiver, forgetting his name now, but they had somebody who was sort of like a DeAnthony Thomas type, like hybrid receiver running back. So Kirby was asked this question about, what do you think about the possibility of LSU running the triple option? And Kirby was like, I would welcome them to do that. It is really hard to run the triple option, and you can't just kind of suddenly choose to do it. With that being said, I would expect some packages with Justin Fields in this game that might not be like traditional triple option, but are going to be sort of like run-based option sort of looks here with some constraint throws off of that. Like, I think that they're going to have to do that. Fromm is a good player, but they're not going to be able to score enough. Just sort of like, if they come out and they basically have the same game plan that they did last year against Alabama, and even if they execute that game plan pretty well, like they did for most of the national championship, they're just not going to score enough points to win this game. They are going to need to make big explosive plays, and that means, I think, mixing in Justin Fields with some interesting packages. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. So, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say one more point about the triple option is like, I would also welcome it because triple option is not a big play offense, so you're just essentially installing plays that are just going to help you get 3 or 4 yards at a time, really.
Right.
Okay, cool. What are you going to do after you get your 3 or 4 yards? You're just going to keep running. Okay. But yeah, I would totally expect Fields to have those types, because we've already seen him run it some, in other games. He's played in, almost every one of their games.
I think so.
Year.
Yeah.
And some of them he didn't really get, like, there were some where he came in and ran 2 zone reads, and that was it. Like, he wasn't a significant package a lot of that time. And even when he's basically the only times he's gotten to throw have been as playing as the backup in a blowout. Like, they really haven't let him throw much. So I wonder if this will be the time they sort of come out and let him throw it a little more, just to make that package, just to break tendency in those package.
Yeah.
The things I would say about no, like you can't really sprinkle in a triple option because as much as Paul Johnson doesn't like his offense being referred to as the triple option, it really is a whole offense that you run it. Like you can't just literally you would be installing a whole new offensive system. It's not just something you could do. And even traditional sort of regular option play, like the speed option, those pitch plays, like you got to practice that a lot to be pretty good at it. Like I remember from like 2012 to 2015, Rice had a quarterback named Dreyfus Jackson, and he was the backup in 12 and 13 and the starter in 14 and 15. And at the beginning of his career, he was a bit more of a runner. And so when he had to come in as an emergency starter when Taylor McHargue, the regular starter, got hurt, they ran a bunch of like traditional option plays with them, the speed option, sprint option, that sort of thing. And I swear to God, we must have fumbled the pitch every damn time.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's not an easy thing to do. And so as far as like traditional option plays go, if that's something they practice, if that's in their playbook that they've worked on, then yeah, I would think it'd be worth using something like that just because, we saw Alabama, bust on the pitch twice Saturday. And, all it takes is one guy getting to the edge, and Georgia's got better athletes than, the Citadel does. But yeah, I think to sort of generalize on, the ways Ben was suggesting there, if that's the kind of thing you want to do to a defense, there are plenty of things that fit in modern offensive systems that stress defenses in exactly the same way. Like, you can, if you want it to be a triple option, you can have a zone read attached to a bubble screen attached to a shovel pass, or, something like there are plenty of ways you can design RPOs and spread option runs and things that would fit in the structure of what Georgia already does offensively that you would do rather than installing actual traditional option plays if you don't have them in already.
I want to answer a couple more questions. Also from Singapore Slang, just asking about generally who poses the greatest threat to Alabama. Sort of a good, because I have a question for you guys. I guess A, is it Clemson? Probably.
It's Clemson.
Yeah. And B, is Clemson like the clear second best team in the country?
Yeah. Certainly like S&P and ESPN's FPI ratings think so.
Somebody has them number one now, right? Doesn't one of the metrics have them over Alabama?
Yeah. FPI has them number one now. That's right. It's hard for me. Like, that's the whole point of objective rating systems that are opponent adjusted, is that you don't say, but they ain't played nobody. Clemson kind of ain't played nobody.
Yeah.
Like nobody. Their schedule is bad. It's closer to UCF's than Alabama's, at least according to S&P, which is like, just the ACC is awful this year.
Well, who's the best team that they've?
Texas A&M.
Yeah, it's not great.
And they've been dominating people lately. They're playing better than they were when they played A&M. So I'm not going to take that game as like, well, you're not going to pull out the transitive property right here. But I don't know. It's just, I definitely think it's Clemson. I do think there's a bit of an unknown factor with Clemson just because they kind of haven't been tested. Like they played some, like Duke is good. Duke is fine. And they, they struggled a bit, but then pulled away pretty easily. Lawrence at times looked like a freshman against BC when BC got pressure on him. And like Clemson's offensive line is not that great. They definitely, like, with all respect to BC's edge rusher number 2, who is a fine, upstanding white pass rusher. Yeah, so they're like Clemson looks like the second best team pretty easily, but there's also, I think, some unknowns with them just because they haven't played a team that's even close to their level.
I think the point about the offensive line is important, and I think that is what was ignored last year heading into the matchup. which is why I think so many people were picking Clemson in that game last year against Alabama. And because I think there was the disparity between what Alabama can do up front on defense versus what Clemson can do up front on offense was kind of ignored. And I think that remains the case this year. Mitch, what do you sort of think about that generally?
Yeah, I think Clemson has more of the pieces that you would need to beat out. I mean, like, they have probably the best defensive line in the country, maybe.
Yeah, they don't. I am very pleased to say that they don't have a single player who's as good as Quinnen Williams.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think their defensive line as individual pieces are kind of overhyped. Like, Clelin Ferrell is the best of them, and he's amazing. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick. But the tackles like Wilkins and Lawrence are kind of more like second roundish type guys. Like, I know when they all came back last year, people were like, "Oh, Clemson could have had 4 first rounders," and they all came back. Well, they couldn't have had 4 because Dexter Lawrence wasn't eligible yet. But they're not all going to be first round guys. Like, they're all really good. And when you have a first rounder, 2 second rounders, and like a 4th rounder like on your defensive line, that's pretty good. But I think you definitely would probably call them the best overall defensive line in the country, even if they don't have a single player that's as disruptive as Quinnen is.
Yeah, so you don't expect the splash plays from the defensive line for Clemson, but they can probably keep Alabama from running it with the least amount of extra effort put into stopping the Alabama run. I think their secondary is okay. And then obviously on offense, Trevor Lawrence is pretty good.
Yeah. I think the difference to me in that matchup is, even when Alabama's offensive line has had its, and like, I think it's possible that they could stop Alabama from running the ball like pretty well. But even when Alabama's had glitches running the ball this year, they've basically been great pass protecting the whole year, other than some, when like Mississippi State got some pressure with blitzes, but they weren't like, I don't know, Alabama just kind of didn't really adjust to those
on
offense. It was sort of weird. So I don't know. If Clemson is just trying to get pressure with their front 4, I feel pretty good about Alabama's ability to protect Tua. And I don't think Clemson's offensive line can protect, like, 1, I don't think they can protect Lawrence, and 2, as great as he is, like, you saw in the BC game, like, he is still a freshman. And as of right now, he is not going to play as well under pressure as Tua would.
Somebody had tweeted me earlier, and I didn't answer it, but asking me what Tua's best plays have been this year, which is obviously kind of sort of nebulous. But do you guys have, like, to go off on a totally different direction, do you guys have like a favorite Tua play this year?
I think the one that stands out to me the most is that one to Jalen Waddle
against Tennessee.
Yeah.
That was good.
I'm partial to the Irv one against Ole Miss.
Okay, where he kind of came back across the field and hit him right in the corner. Yeah, that one's good. The opening or the second play in the Missouri game, where they wanted to throw the smoke and go down to the left side, and then that wasn't there, so then he had to came back and he hit Judy on the deep post for a touchdown. Like, that was pretty spectacular. Obviously, he's made the two sort of like highlight plays in the pocket that he's made, or it's the first touchdown of the year against Louisville, and then the first touchdown against Tennessee, where he kind of bought time and then found Judy in the corner again. I guess those are the ones that stand out. I mean, there are so many. Is the Heisman? So I had texted you guys about this before, but speaking of Tua, the Heisman race. Kyler Murray's getting getting some hype.
Like, it's actually just like Kyler had passed him in both like passer efficiency, like the NCAA number, and ESPN's QBR, like just barely as of a week ago. But Tua just pulled back ahead of him in both after this last week. I think Tua is still the favorite, just sort of as a matter of inertia and a matter of being the best player on the best team. I don't think it's guaranteed. Like if he plays poorly and Alabama loses, one of the next two, and Kyler continues to just totally blow up,
right?
It could happen. I think he's the pretty clear front runner, and as long as he doesn't collapse over the next 2 weeks, it's probably his to lose.
Mitch, when I asked this to you guys over text, Mitch had pointed out to me that the betting lines are still very, very slanted in Tua's favor. Tua's minus 400 and Kyler's plus 450. So, so Vegas doesn't really think there's much of a competition here. Mitch, where do you sort of stand on that?
Yeah, it hasn't moved in weeks. The Vegas line, at least. Yeah, unless Tua blows a tire somewhere, I think it's his to lose. I think Kyler Murray can keep putting up the same numbers.
Yeah. And if Oklahoma loses to West Virginia, or to, in all likelihood, if they lose to West Virginia, or if they beat West Virginia and then lose to Texas in the championship game, because Texas actually just has to beat Kansas this weekend, and they're guaranteed to be in the Big 12 championship game.
Wait, no matter what?
Yeah. Because West Virginia lost again, so Texas and West Virginia each have two Big 12 losses. Yeah. So if Texas wins, they'll be at 2 losses, and then if West Virginia loses against Oklahoma, they'd have 3, so they'd be out. And then if Oklahoma loses, they'd have 2, but Texas has the tiebreaker.
So Oklahoma's not locked in yet.
No. It's
so Texas. So basically, what's going to happen is that Texas is going to go. Although sometimes they don't get up for games where it's a pretty lopsided competition, and we got some crazy shit going on in Texas right now.
Are you meaning to suggest that Texas could possibly lose in football to Oklahoma or to Kansas? That couldn't happen, could it?
No, never. Not with such a stable coach. Also,
did you hear though that apparently to their last game, his wife wore a shirt that said "Okay, cool, hook 'em"?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
somebody was like, I saw somebody on Twitter say it's like the definition of ride or die.
Yeah,
like considering what the content, what the content of those text messages.
Oh yeah.
And then for it to be her that wore the shirt is really kind of amazing. I mean, it might also not be true. There's no reason why we should trust the truthfulness of those text messages, but really just pretty remarkable. Yeah, it just, I mean.
Okay, on the Tua thing, you guys think if he puts up the same type of numbers that he did against LSU, against Auburn and Georgia, that he would still win? Or do you think he needs to play better? Or better numbers? I think
LSU numbers would do it. Mississippi State numbers might make it close. Yeah, because that was what, 60% for 150 yards and 1 touchdown. That's probably not going to get it done, but I expect it to probably be better than that. So I think if it's LSU level, I think it's still his.
We are sort of getting to the point where his lack of playing the whole games is hurting him a little bit. And I've seen people say here are their comparisons through just 3 quarters. But Tua didn't even play 3 quarters in a lot of his games.
Yeah.
Tua played 4 or 5 possessions against Louisville. He played maybe 5 or 6 possessions against Louisville, I think. And he played a half against Arkansas, maybe, and so many other games where he barely played, and so it doesn't even I saw that Kyler Murray's nudged ahead for only through the 3rd quarter stats on some of the numbers, but barely. And if Tua had played through 3 quarters in all of his games, all of his counting stats would be better. He was pulled in some of these games where he was just tearing teams apart, and it's okay, well, we got to get him out.
And if the Alabama offense had been incentivized the same way the Oklahoma offense has in 3rd quarters, even more so.
Yeah. To me, Kyler is great, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Tua is a more impressive player. I think Tua has had a more impressive year. I think Tua has been like, pretty transcendent at times, like when he's been on top of his game. And so just on the eye test, I really do think that like Tua is the best. Well, I don't know if he's the best player in the country because it's so hard to sort of make those comparisons across positions, but he is the best player as far as Heisman candidates go. I guess I'll sort of leave it at that. How do you guys do you guys have a preference? Let's say that Alabama wins out and Alabama's at number 1. Do you guys have a preference about how the 3 and 4 spots shake up? Assume also that Clemson wins out and they're at number 2.
Not really. I mean, Notre Dame and Michigan are really similar in a lot of ways, honestly. So I don't know. They're both good teams. They're both like top 10 quality teams. They're both worthy playoff participants. Right. There's a pretty clear separation, I think, at the level they're at. I mean, they're like, I think this year you have a situation where Alabama and Clemson are kind of in a tier of their own. And then you have a second tier that's sort of Georgia, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Oklahoma probably is also in that tier. So, and like Michigan and Notre Dame are not only similar talent levels, but similar styles. Like they're pretty similar teams. And so I just like, there's not one that Alabama like very obviously matches up better against. Like maybe Michigan only because their offensive line is kind of iffy at times. Right. So I think if they played Michigan, there's a good chance that they could just absolutely wreck that offense and just destroy Shea Patterson because, he would have Quentin Williams in his face the entire time. But I don't think there's a significant enough difference in style or talent between those two teams that you really care which one it is.
Let me expand the question out a little further then. 5 teams. Rank them in terms of the favorability of the matchup for Alabama, from most favorable to least favorable. So obviously the 2 you're talking about, Notre Dame and Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Washington State.
Washington State, you'd like to play the most because great story, great year, they're fun, but like that the talent is just there's a gulf between them and the other teams. Ohio State, because Tua would throw for 500 yards. Michigan and Notre Dame. It was Michigan, Notre Dame, Clemson, the last ones.
No, Clemson, Oklahoma.
Okay. I think. I think I would put Michigan and Notre Dame, tied at the 3 spot, and then I'd least like to play Oklahoma, even though like Alabama would score 60 points on Oklahoma, but like, if there's a possibility that like Tua gets hurt or he has a bad game and throws some intercept, like a shootout is always going to be flukier, and Oklahoma has the best chance of putting Alabama in a shootout.
It's a game you feel like you have less control over, I think, than the games against Notre Dame and Michigan. Mitch, what about you?
Same thing. I would put Oklahoma last just because should it get to a shootout, I think they have the best chance to actually beat Alabama.
I think I agree. I think I'm there. Like Ohio State. So, I mean, if you want the easiest road for Alabama, then I guess it is important to root for Ohio State this weekend. What are all the games that we have to root for if we're concerned about Alabama losing to Georgia?
So I think you want Georgia to lose to Georgia Tech, actually, because I don't think that lowers the opinion. I don't think that lowers the opinion of Georgia enough that it's like much more damaging than to lose to them if they have one loss. Yeah. So, because like if Georgia's 12-1 and is SEC champion, they're going, and so that takes a spot away. So I think I think you want Georgia out of there. So I think you do root for Georgia Tech, actually.
So does 12-1 Alabama definitely go over 11-2 Georgia?
Yeah. The committee has done this before, this exact thing. They didn't meet in the championship game, but in
that is a significant difference, though, right? Like you're going to say Penn State and Ohio State?
Yeah, but I mean,
I guess that's true. Penn State beat them during the regular season.
Yeah, as long as it's a close game. Penn State beat Ohio State in 2016 and then won the conference championship. They were a 2-loss, 11-2 conference champion, and Ohio State was 12-1 with their only loss being to them, and Ohio State went over them.
So it's just a question of whether the recency bias of seeing the game the day before would impact them in a way that would impact the committee in a way that it didn't in 2016.
Yeah.
And I guess you would assume that it wouldn't. So okay, what about in a scenario where Georgia wins out?
Yeah. So like even if that doesn't I would say what you want as many of these things as possible to happen. You want Oklahoma to lose either to West Virginia or in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, you root for Clemson to lose to South Carolina and Pitt. They're not going to, but you root for those things regardless, I guess. You want Ohio State to win probably because you have a better chance of making it over 12-1 Ohio State than you do over 12-1 Michigan. Obviously, on championship weekend, you root for Northwestern regardless of who it is. Northwestern is not going to beat whoever it is, but
yeah, they really won't. Well, I mean, Ohio State. Ohio State's been so glitchy. Who knows? But yeah, probably not.
And Notre Dame against USC, you want them to lose.
You root for USC. You probably ought to root for Washington to beat Wazoo, as boring as that is, and as unlikely as it is, because Wazoo played nobody out of conference. So even if they're 12-1 Pac champion,
they won't go over 12-1 Alabama. Yeah. Okay. Score predictions.
42-10.
I will go 45-7.
50-13.
I would love a 50. When is the last time that Alabama put 50 on Auburn? Because they didn't.
2014.
Oh, that's right. I was going to say because they didn't do it in 2012. If they didn't do it in 2012, when would they have done it? But that's right. They did.
Yeah, 55-44.
That was God. That was a crazy game.
Yeah.
Were we all there? Mitch, were you there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
That was I watched. I was in my grandmother's seats.
Oh, that's right. You weren't in the student section for that, right? Wasn't Aaron there too for that one with you guys?
Yeah, me, Aaron, and my grandparents, and we sat there and watched the students do.
God, that's right.
Dixieland Delight Band.
The most famous thing for that. There's a great video on YouTube where you can hear it so clearly how loud they are. It's amazing. It's just really amazing. Okay, one more thing. Do the students behave for Dixieland Delight?
They haven't even behaved yet, right?
Right.
I think haven't they been piping in?
They've been piping in. Yeah,
they've just been drowned out.
Really quite smart if you think.
Great move on Greg Burns' part. They're not going to do it, but they want it. Does anyone really care if they say no? They don't care.
What was
they
it
just
AL.com wrote an article, right? Right after that game, killing Alabama for doing it or something.
It was probably Skarbinski, wasn't it?
It was either Skarbinski or Goodman. It was probably Skarbinski, because it was on the heels of earlier that year. The LSU fans did a very loud "fuck Saban" chant. I think that was it was really clear, even on the TV. And somebody at AL.com wrote an article. Was I think it was Skarbinski. You're right. It was saying this is no better. Alabama is just as bad. And it's I don't really give a shit. None of this matters. I don't care about the "fuck Saban" chant. That doesn't bother me at all. And I also don't care about "fuck Auburn." But you're right. They're probably not going to behave because they haven't behaved yet. All right. Well.
All right. I think that'll do it for us this week. So happy Thanksgiving, y'all, and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Yep. Roll Tide.